Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere, and this is the podcast for the supply chain leader who wants to be in the know but is on the go, which we often are these days. And also, it is a podcast series that helps people to think about how do they make better decisions with new forms of technology? Because our current applications of technology often leave us with gaps, and we're not able to close the gaps unless we think differently. Today, I am speaking to Richard Lebovitz, and Richard is a founder of LeanDNA, which is a company that works on the synchronization of procurement and manufacturing data, a really direct procurement across multiple manufacturing sites and across procurement. Richard, welcome to the show today.
Great to be here, Laura. Excited to chat with you.
So, Richard, tell the group a little bit about yourself. You're actually a lean expert. When I first met you, you were, doing an awful lot of work around lean. And how did you get from that focus on lean to running this company? Tell the group a little bit about you.
Yeah, it's a great little history, I guess, in terms of where I came from. But I started about 30 years ago, if you can imagine now, Laura, and where I was a partner with a Japanese firm that was really focused on lean transformation when the word was just really evolving. The whole methodology was just coming to terms. And my partners had worked for Honda and Toyota early on, and were some of the first individuals to come outside of Japan and really teach that. And fortunately, I was able to get connected with them. And I had a technology software background as well as a manufacturing background. And as I started to work with them over many years to lead these transformations, what I found is that a lot of the management and optimization when you get into these lean modern factories was very spreadsheet based. And I early on started to see the opportunity of, how do we leverage technology to really automate a lot of these activities that were taking place? So a lot of my career has been in how do you leverage kind of the IT knowledge of how these systems work with the domain knowledge around lean manufacturing, supply chain to really solve these complicated issues. And that ultimately, after many years with the Japanese firm, I actually, in the late 90s, started a company called Factory Logic that was really focused on optimizing lean factories. How do you schedule them? How do you deal with material flow, electronic or digital Kanban systems? And that company was acquired by SAP in the early 2000s. And then after that, I went on to found our current company called LeanDNA. And that was really taking what we understood around lean modern factories and how do you now extend those opportunities outside of the factory into the supply chain, and really focused on the synchronization. How do you do a better job around supply chain execution? And today we're in about 28 countries, multiple industries, and it's basically been exciting for me over the years to leverage this deep domain knowledge around lean manufacturing supply chain, and then combine it with cloud technology, advanced analytics to solve real problems.
Well, a lot of lean thinking is not necessarily aligned with IT. How have you gotten over that gap?
Well, I think it goes back to, speaking with data. A lot of times people all want to achieve the same objectives. It's like, I want to improve my on-time delivery. I want to improve my turns or reduce my DOI. And so what I've found over the years is that IT, at the end of the day, they want to solve problems, but there is a disconnect between IT and sometimes people running operations. And I would actually argue that it's gotten worse and worse. Sometimes the people building these systems are, they know the latest technology. They've been building these systems 8 or 10 years, but the people running operations have been doing this for 20 or 30. So how do you bridge that gap? And that's been a big part of what I've focused on over the years and what our company does. But a lot of times it's around making things simple, easy to understand, even IT systems, so that everybody kind of gets aligned with how to use these technologies to solve real problems. And that understanding is really what drives change, in my opinion, and adoption.
Well, in the research that I've done, Richard, the automation of direct materials to the factory is an opportunity that's really not closed by either ERP or advanced planning. The average purchase order changes 3.8 times, and the factory buyer who's really bringing in against the bill of material and the purchase order that information is not getting it back to the supply chain planner and the existing taxonomies. So how do you go into an account and help people to see the art of the possible and challenge existing paradigms? How's that been for you?
Yeah, so what I would say is, to your point, Laura, the problem's actually gotten worse and worse. There's a lot more, globalization in terms of supply chain. I was a big part of that. I've worked in 15 countries and worked all over the world because supply chain now is, in terms of who makes the parts, it's all over. And then you look at operations at the same time, the complexity, the number of SKUs and options that a factory make has also grown dramatically, to your point. So the challenges are getting harder and harder. So a lot of what we do is try to break it down into kind of different stages of implementation. It's like at the end of the day, picking a few things that people can go understand, like what we call inventory actions, and really focusing, for example, on the role of a buyer and helping them understand what are the most important things I can do today that's going to have the biggest impact on improving my delivery by getting the materials in when I need it. But at the same time, how do I identify those materials I should push out so that I don't get in that excess? So taking something as simple as that, but using powerful analytics, prioritizing the work that needs to take place day to day, and more importantly, having a workflow. And when I say workflow, Laura, I mean like the user interface, thinking about their role day to day. What do they need to look at, and how do you not change what they do, but use analytics, but a good workflow to make their jobs simple and easy? And then if you do that, it radically transforms how that buyer is going to work day to day and be impactful. And then the second step is to start to break down these silos, right? Well, that's the buyer role. How do you now provide the right visibility to that kind of supply chain planner, material planner? How do we also take that information around prioritization and extend that to the supplier so that they know, okay, this is really a high priority. I got to ship that immediately. That's going to impact that factory's ability to build. And in fact, I don't need this other material. And so workflow around prioritization and then extending that over time across these disconnected silos ultimately is all about making work easy for people. And if you do that through data, through good workflow, that's where you start to see dramatic adoption and dramatic change as well in terms of business performance.
Well, Richard, it sounds simple, but it isn't, right? The average company has what, 30 manufacturing sites? So what's the average number of manufacturing sites for your clients?
I would say a lot of our customers, they'll have 30, 40. We have customers that have deployed LeanDNA across not only, let's say, 65 manufacturing sites, but then we're also connected to over 1,000 of their suppliers. So they're extremely complicated. What I would say in more of my philosophy over the years, and it even came from my Japanese partners that trained me over 30 years ago, it's making things complicated for people is very easy, but making things easy for people is very, very complicated. And so I view our job from a transformation as well as from a data or analytics perspective is do that hard work on the back end so that on the front end or that information being used by individuals is easy, Laura. But you're exactly right. I don't mean to make it sound simple because what we do is very, very complicated, from how you extract the data, how do you normalize the data, how do you create prioritized actions with very complicated data that's getting more complicated every day. But where I view the opportunity is how do you use technology to ultimately make it easy for people?
Well, I like your statement of it's easy to make things complicated. It's hard to make things simple, but just bear with me, Richard. So if you've got, 30 to 60 factories, and those 30 to 60 factories will often have different planning systems, or they could be connected to different ERP systems with different material requirements planning. Of course, material requirements planning doesn't necessarily reflect what the scheduler needs to plan. And then you've got hundreds of supply chain planning planners that are working with conventional APS, and you've got probably an average of 50 to 100 buyers that are all dealing with different kinds of materials. And then you've got, of course, then all of your supplier contacts. It's a complicated world, and there's nothing in the flow of any of those applications that really takes the bill of material, the purchase order, synchronizes the changes of the purchase order with factory scheduling, to look at what does the factory really need when, and gives information on on-time delivery and quality of conformance by suppliers to allow the manufacturing buyers at the manufacturing plants to collaborate with other people like themselves to talk about supplier performance, who's doing it well, where are their gaps. I can't find anything in the industry that really talks about that, which is waste. And I think that's the gap that you're filling. And it sounds easy, but it's really complicated in these large organizations, right?
Yeah, exactly, Laura. So it's very, very complicated from a technology and analytics. And like I said, I've been in this industry over 30 years. This is my third startup. And I think we're really on to some real innovative breakthroughs in terms of what we do, but it is complicated to make it work, no doubt, to your point. In fact, we have, some of our customers, we'll have one of our largest customers, we probably have about 500 buyers that are using LeanDNA every single day to provide these analytics. So some of what, when you start talking about how you progress, to your point, again, we deal with a lot of that complexity on the back end. I guess that's core to what we do. And I know we have a webinar this Thursday where we're going to be really digging into this in a lot more detail. And I hope everybody listening to this podcast can join. But the way to approach it from what we've found is that you really have to start kind of step by step. And this just comes back from my learnings over time, is that to take this complexity and show an architecture and a flow that's just going to change overnight is just not reality. So a lot of what we spend time working through is how do you understand the goals, but also understand this complexity and break it down to the level where you can take one of 65 manufacturing sites. Let's start there with a handful of suppliers and let's make real measurable progress, because some of these changes, again, knowing that we deal with a lot of the back end around data integration and data normalization and the analytics, you still have a change management challenge you have to deal with. So our experience has been is combining that complexity of technology that's solving the problem with a strategy of change management and transformation where you kind of take people through change a little bit step by step. Now, it doesn't mean you have to go slow, but a lot of the success happens when people start to understand and they learn through data and they learn to see. That was a term in Lean many, many years ago, but we have to help people see the opportunity, see how the technology can be leveraged, take them through these changes step by step, thinking about a buyer, thinking about a planner, how do we communicate with the supplier? And then through the learnings and then through success, that's where we start to now expand over time. So from a technology and a company perspective, we're often, they may have 65 sites, but we're going to start in 2 or 3. And then we show the success. People get excited about the results. They're interested to learn. Going back to, you have to make it easy now for them to learn and to understand how these complicated systems work together. And then they start to transform and make progress. I think part of the challenge too, Laura, I know you're heavy into this area and a real expert across these different systems. But people also think that sometimes every system has to do everything. And it's also important to understand that an ERP is really, really great at doing these type of things. APS may be good at this, but then there's execution systems and technology around the analytics that we do that are very complementary to these other systems. But it's very important to understand where we fit and what do we do to complement and drive more value out of these systems versus sometimes the perception is we're replacing an ERP or replacing a BI tool, which is not correct. We're complementing those, but it's important for companies to understand where we fit versus these other technologies that exist.
Okay, so we've got a webcast coming up this Thursday. We hope people will join us. And Richard, thank you for joining us and talking about it today. And I hope to see people there.
Excited as well, Laura.